Okay. Hopefully nothing crashes this time. So this is the opening frame of my speaker project. So I turned off all the party lights and put in a really dim Omni light so you can see better inside the box. But I'll drag my little timer out here, and the camera just pulls back off of that, turns very fast towards the ground, looks at the speaker, goes down, swoops around in front of it, and then you can kind of see what's going on. So let me get out of the camera. So here we have a large reflective box, which I chamfered the edges of. It's reflective because, let me select the box, I added an edit mesh modifier, and then I selected the faces. So like there's this face, for example, and I went into the material editor, and I made this, I called it the plain flat mirror, and I clicked this little guy, which says assign material to selection, and it assigned it just to that face. And I did the same thing for all four sides and the roof. I left the chamfered corners not mirrored, because I thought that might be interesting, and it was. These little guys down here, I manually selected all these little faces and applied these various self-illuminated, very simple blends to them. And I learned how to do that by messing around with my actual little speaker guy here. Select a speaker, please. Because I wanted to put a kind of a glowing material on the outside of the cones so you'd be able to see them as they bounced. Back when I was still planning on this being a relatively dark scene. That was before I decided on the crazy party lights. Speaking of which, the way I did that was I made this sphere, which is the opening shot, and I set 2 circles to orbit said sphere. So as the box is turning, these circles are turning. Except this guy. This guy is not even turned on. This is my base light, basically, from which all others are cloned. So anywho, these guys rotate relatively slowly around the sphere as the box turns counterclockwise. Speaking of the turning box, I'm kind of proud of this little aspect of this project. Bring this guy over. Around here? Yeah. Around here, I make the camera swoop from the left front to the right front, and I matched the rate at which the box was turning, so it kind of looks like it stopped, even though it didn't. I thought that was kind of neat. And then I do the swoopy swoops. Speaking of which, the way that worked was I used the dope sheet, which is this guy, and the dope sheet is pretty rad. You gotta click on the box again. You can go all the way down to the material level, and as you can see right here, I used keyframes to turn the opacity, get deeper in, to turn the opacity of these guys, extended parameters, opacity. You can do so much stuff. I don't know what any of this does, but I turned it off on, and off on off, and you know, things like that. And I was able to do it in various sequences to give me that cool kind of piano, dragging your fingers across a piano effect, but with color. What else? Oh yeah, while these guys are opacity 0, obviously my party lights can get out, and then I've just got a big black line. That kind of sucks. So I made another box, which lives outside the first box. This huge gymnasium doesn't turn. It just sits still, and the inside of all 6 sides are mirrored inwards. And that lets the light which escapes through these opacity 0 chamfered edges around the top and bottom to bounce around and bounce back in through these one-sided polygons and hit the floor on another side and bounce again. Speaking of which, the floor is just a big plane that I made and applied a similar mirror to on top of that cool checkered pattern. I did that because it didn't seem... Yeah, you can actually see through it right there. Isn't that cool? It didn't seem reasonable to me that the floor would be spinning underneath my stationary speaker, so I just took the bottom polygon off my box and slapped that plane on there and made it line up just so, as they say. That is pretty much it. I had initially attempted to do this cool thing where my camera comes down and you see this little camera right here? That is my constrained camera. And my first camera would come in and settle in and nestle on top of my constrained camera, which doesn't do that anymore, so you can't see it. And then the perspective was going to shift to the constrained camera, which used to rotate, but it was seamless. It was kind of cool. My first export did that, but I decided that the rotation of the camera, which went the opposite of the rotation of the box, made everything kind of nuts and just too hard to absorb. And since the point of this is hypothetically to show off my speaker model, which I worked on, and not to show off my crazy disco room, I decided to do away with the orbiting and just stick to the one camera, which just swoops in and then does a little bit of another swoop, and then it just kind of fades out. Speaker animation wise, tried a bunch of different things. It more or less lines up with the music. 3ds Max was crashing a lot while I was trying to do this, and when I would, have you hold down Control and Alt and click on your little, call it a timeline, I guess, you can kind of stretch your frames out and work more precisely. When I was doing that, sometimes the audio would update accordingly, and sometimes it wouldn't. And I wouldn't perhaps realize that I was off a bit until I'd done 100 keyframes. And that was a bit frustrating. That's why this took 13 or 14 hours on Friday to finish this up. This is actually my high poly model. I decided I liked it better. Oops. And I did all of my stuff to the high poly version. And I just parented everything to various things. So if I click on my speaker cones, and I'm actually already in Edit Poly, I created, whoops, I'm probably not right. Anywho, I created a selection set of the inside of the speaker cones, which I hope is still here somewhere. It doesn't matter too much, but nope. I did that so that I could animate just the inside and this outer ring and not make the rest of the cone stretch, which was making the base stretch, which you can't even really see, but I knew it would happen and it was bothering me in my brain. But that's about it. I had heckin' fun doing this. Spent way too much time on it, but I learned so much, and it was a lot of fun. And I think that's all. So take it, essay.